Discoverability. It's a word you may not have even had in your daily vernacular until you got into podcasting. And when you did, probably got all kinds of conflicting advice about when you should publish, how often, where, what format. It's informed almost every aspect of podcast creation to the point where it's enough to make you just want to throw your laptop out the window. This market is ever changing. And with the introduction of YouTube as now the podcasting platform for so many people, it's hard to keep up with the advice about SEO or AEO, which is, by the way, answer engine optimization. Whether video is crucial to discovery when it comes to the social media video clips. I can't even keep up as the technology and the media landscape changes, which is why I brought today's guest on. I know that she is deeply embedded in this world and could teach us a lot, not just because she is literally a professor of podcasting. And pro tip / side note, I think far too few people who host podcasts choose their topics and guests based on what they themselves can learn from that guest. They're often concerned with how smart can they sound, or look what guest I got, how cool am I, and less with what can this guest impart in terms of new knowledge, new information, new perspectives. So if you're starting a podcast, have a podcast, wondering what kind of guest to get, Anika Jackson, who is today's guest, is a perfect example, or the reasons for having her on, which is I wanted a professor of podcasting on my show to teach you and me a little something. Anika Jackson is, yes, a professor at USC Annenberg, where she teaches about the future of media and podcasting. She is host of the globally ranked, downloaded a bajillion times podcast, Your Brand Amplified. And she is a brand strategist who helped entrepreneurs grow through the power of AI and podcasting. She holds an MBA specializing in artificial intelligence and machine learning. She has been a startup advisor, a judge for the Webby Awards, and generally spends a lot more time thinking about discoverability than probably the rest of us do. So today we will talk about what matters in discoverability and where should we spend our limited time in order to ensure our podcast is discovered by the people we want to reach. Just a little heads up. The first part of this conversation does get a little more technical and in the weeds, but stick with us because it's not all about keyword stuffing and ranking. I think you'll feel pleasantly rewarded and a little bit relieved when you hear about the optimization metric that Anika says is more important than any other. And the hint is you won't ever find it on a dashboard. Let's get into it with Anika Jackson. Okay, hi, Anika. It is so good to have you here, an actual professor of podcasting. Is that accurate? Can I say that?
You can absolutely say that. Yes. Thank you, Courtney. I love any time that you and I can be in a room together in person or via technology.
Yes. I think appropriate that I'm identifying you as a professor right now because I think I'm going to learn a lot in what we talk about today, SEO and discoverability of podcasts in the year 2026. I am always one who looks to have her knowledge updated and challenged. I have often said that SEO in podcasting sort of doesn't exist in the way we think of it in terms of websites, but that may be an incorrect statement. So let's hear it.
Yes and no is the short answer. So classic SEO can work because you're going to have a transcript, right? You're going to have words. Perhaps you turn your podcast into an article or a blog post or something on your website. So in that way, traditional SEO, if you think about it as on-page Google, your website, putting in the metadata and the keywords is important. But I think it's important for us to think about, obviously can't pick up the audio. That's not going to play into this SEO model, but it is everything surrounding that. So when I look at SEO for my show, because I've just been going through and redoing all of my past catalog, titles, show notes, descriptions to make sure that they're up to date, am I ranking for the right keywords via Google or Bing or whatever other normal search, but then also, of course, in LLM search. because that is a thing.
I want to hear about that too. Say more.
So looking at how we're ranking, are we making sure that we're using kind of keyword stuffing for different platforms? Apple, Spotify might be the two biggest platforms, but they look for different signals because they have different audiences that are coming to each platform.
Yeah.
So, we have a lot of space. Most people don't use it for your podcast description, and we need to use as much of it as possible. And we do need to use certain things that I honestly have not been great at because things are ever changing and we all are always trying to increase our own knowledge and use the best practices we use for clients and for others on our own shows too.
Yeah. So we've talked about this before, the whole Dr. Heal Thyself situation. I mean, I had a conversation with a client today or prospective client. I was like, wow, this is a tangent, but that's how we roll. At the end, he was like, I would love to get to know more of how you think and how you work. And I was like, holy cow, I'm going to send him one of my podcast episodes that talks about his exact thing, which I think I've told every client to do that. And it's the first time I'm doing it myself. So
amazing.
I'm glad you admit to not always doing the things that you advise others to do. One thing that I picked up just now was the whole keyword stuffing. Can you say more about that?
What it means to me is, are you using every possible keyword and variation, like phrase, that you can? So one thing is, it'll change depending on the episode. Your Brand Amplified has a big variety of guests. So one week we might be talking about an SEO and branding company that has chosen not to use AI as much and is using people. Or we might be talking to an author of sci-fi, mystery, fantasy books and his process. So very disparate. So that consistency sometimes doesn't show up. So I have to be consistent in the way I'm framing the conversation, in the words that I'm using, but then also make sure I'm signaling special episodes, right? So I want to make sure people understand when they come to my show, every episode's going to be different. And that's what makes it fun for me.
Yeah.
And it makes it a little crazy as well.
Yeah.
Because it's not just one topic.
Yeah.
But you are going to hear about somebody's brand. You're going to hear about their process, their story. So making sure I have things that are consistent that way and in the way I ask questions is important. And making sure those are some of the signals. So then that also drives down into consistency. So I'm right now reformatting all of my show notes so that it's a little paragraph. Here's who I spoke to and what we're speaking about. But then I'll have the important things you're going to learn. And I'll even pull out some of the key points. So could somebody cheat and not listen to the episode? They could, and they'll get some of that important information, but it's not as rich of an experience as if they actually listen to the episode.
Right.
So just making it easy for discoverability, easy for people to find the information they want right then.
When you say keyword stuffing, you're talking about the title, the description. Those are where those keywords go. And do they have to be organically within the sentence? Or, sometimes you see those like at the end, there's just like hashtags or like a blob of text. How do you and where do you keyword stuff?
Yeah. So that's a great question. One way you can is, of course, in the paragraphs or in the show notes, right? The episode notes, I should say, because some people, when they hear show notes, think I'm talking about the whole show. So your overall description of your show, but then also each episode's notes. So you want to insert where you can, but you also can have some of the hashtags. But then usually when you upload to your hosting platform, there's also a place to put individualized keywords for that episode. And so it's a real disservice if we're not utilizing every single space we can use. And I've been guilty of it. I'm sure you've been guilty,
Oh yeah. I just scroll right past the keywords that I'm sure Libsyn has that and I don't use it. And I will now.
It's to our advantage to use every possible space we can.
When you talk about the best practices, are they the same for LLMs as they are for all other sort of web-based tools?
They are a little different. So this is something I'm still in the discovery process. Right?
Yeah, it's a new territory.
But I would say that, answer engine optimization overall, Chat, Perplexity, Gemini, Google, overviews even, they'll extract and cite as we see with AI overviews, right? Rather than just optimize to rank for a click. These systems aren't listening to our raw audio, they're reading the text. So we're making sure that we're applying the same principles to the transcripts, the show notes, any blog recaps, that we're publishing full transcripts, not just teasers. We're leading show notes with direct takeaways near the top. So that way these AI engines can see exactly what somebody's going to learn. So when somebody's putting in a search, wherever they are, the same indicators will come up. And that's also where things like, do we love doing social media? Do we love putting out enough newsletters? All the things that are part of the engine, they aren't necessary because a lot of podcast discoverability is happening on social media.
I have so many the things that pop up around this, the video of it all, the social media of it all. And even just now, I've had a whole fire hose of things I need to do. And I think it varies based on your goals. But all things being equal, there's been a lot of debate about whether, I don't know if you saw the article, but there was like the clipification of podcasting and how a lot of people don't even watch podcasts or listen to them, but they get what they need from the clip and then that's it. And I will say, as a focus group of one, I have watched Amy Poehler's podcast maybe twice, but I see her clips all the time. And I feel like that's enough of a meal on that. Am I typical? What do you think? Like, of all the places we spend our time, are they hurting our strategy, helping?
I think it's a double-edged sword because I think they're a necessity these days, but I have seen the same articles where a lot of people are becoming fans of shows, but they're not necessarily converting to downloads for us. So then you have to think about what is your overall strategy. And going back to one of your questions, what are your goals? Is your goal to make money from advertising? Right? That might be a little bit harder lift, but I think our overall goals should be to really connect with the right people, have the right people on our shows, and connect to the right audience that maybe wants to do other stuff with us.
Yeah, I had an aha when you were saying that, which is I constantly have to correct people's assumptions in that the advice that applies to, an aspiring Amy Poehler, who that is their business, versus people like me who are, I sell my own brain, I sell my own services. And so it kind of doesn't matter where you find me as much, right? Like I'm not going for the download gold. And I had someone email me today like, oh, you're just killing it in your business. You're killing it. I see you on social media. And that right there is an example of, yeah, I have put efforts into my social media. They may not ever listen to my podcast, but they know I exist and I have a podcast business because of that. So I think that's an important distinction about what your goals are, right? Like not all discovery is created equal. And we haven't even talked about YouTube yet. And the way I've thought about it, just from what I know about Google owning YouTube and therefore the searchability overall that indexes a YouTube podcast is more powerful. You can be more evergreen, you're findable. Maybe can you say more about the power of YouTube versus the other two? And does everybody need to be on YouTube now?
What's funny is I have some guests who are like, great, when you put the episode on YouTube, let me know. And I'm like, wait, my newest podcast, I have the YouTube channel, but I haven't done anything on it yet.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay. So there are a lot of people who like to listen and perhaps watch on YouTube. Like you said, Google's still trying to own the search game. So that's why you'll now see, they'll put the YouTube videos, right? There's a big video section now when you're just doing a Google search. Perhaps when somebody's doing a search for who's the best person to work with to make sure that my podcast sounds amazing and I'm using the right strategy, right? And hopefully,
but also you.
Yeah, we're different, but we would hope that you would come up, right? Yeah. And YouTube is still used heavily for search. So as much as we don't want people to listen to those early episodes, perhaps, of our shows, it's still important to go back and do a refresh and make sure, am I optimizing for the right signals so that I can be discovered?
One of the things I really am trying to drive home with people who are stuck in their heads about what their podcast should be, let alone, once it's out in the world and being discovered, is you just have to go for it. And I feel like someone like you, who's a real leader in this space, letting that be, letting it, and being able to point to it and say, hey, like if you're dealing with a student or someone who's like, I can't do it, I could never be as good as you, be like, go listen to my episode 1. And like, we all have to start somewhere. So there's that. I want to talk a little bit about, we've belabored the SEO point, a little bit of the AEO, but what about other things that people aren't doing, that have nothing to do with that kind of discovery? What are some like sort of secrets or underused tools that you can think of?
There are a couple of things. One is, and some people will say a lot of social media is being taken over by AI bots, but Pinterest, surprisingly, has been a great place for discoverability. And you can put video clips and other and graphics and all kinds of things. And that is a place that I do have not a huge following, but more people than follow me on YouTube.
Wow.
For my show. So
Okay.
it is, I think, an underrated place. And depending on what kind of show, you could divide it by different categories, depending on what you think people might be searching for.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a social media tool that I don't think is as well utilized as it can be. I think there are things like we know Threads is really leaning into the
Yeah.
space. So I am certainly not utilizing it to the best of my ability, but it's kind of the most fun sandbox because it's still fresh and people are still talking to strangers and
Yes.
it's not fully I do see people that I cringe when I'm like, don't monetize that way or like don't overly sell yourself. Like, let's just I want a
Yeah.
place where I can just be real and talk about things I wouldn't talk about. But I also
Yeah.
do want to share my podcast, but I
Yeah.
want to do it in a way that's a little more authentic. I know
I
people
know the
think that
world's
word is overused.
overused.
I love that word, but yeah,
It's so true.
authentic.
I know. We can't let them take our favorite words.
Yes,
Already AI took the M dash and I'm taking it back.
yes.
But to go back to Pinterest, it's interesting because I'm thinking about someone I've been talking to about starting a podcast, and she is an interior designer. And that
Ooh.
seems like I don't really think of Pinterest when I think of podcasts, but that's got to be such fertile ground for her. And she absolutely should. TikTok, you mentioned it earlier that like it's hard for podcasters. Can you say more? Because I feel like TikTok gets a lot of the headlines when people think about short clip based video. But for me, it's like, I'll deal with that someday. What about TikTok and podcasting?
I think, like any social media, if you're going to choose something like TikTok, you have to be willing to put in the time.
Mm,
So ask yourself if you have the time. Do you have a team who can help with editing and creating those clips and posting and making sure you're using the right hashtags or keywords for discoverability? Because it can be really hard to find your voice. Like I don't really like to go to TikTok much because somehow I got into the true crime loop. And so I'll see a lot of like scary things.
Oh,
Not things I don't watch stuff like that on TV. Like I'm not into the
you
whole
clicked on
genre.
one thing once, and the rest
Yes.
of your life, your algorithm is Anika is a true crime fan.
Yes.
Right.
And so I think it's really easy to be put into a box,
Hmm.
even more so perhaps on TikTok than other platforms. And you have to think about like what's really going to be engaging about my content and create those memorable moments, right? It's not necessarily about virality, but it's about spreadability. So are you saying the right things that will jog somebody to say, ooh, I'm going to follow their content now?
Right.
And so I think, there's a difference between we put a lot of stuff out on social media, but how intentional are you being? It can be a big time suck. You can start with the basics, just, say, okay, I'm going to do this, and this platform, put the same things out. But eventually you're probably going to want to change it a little bit so that you actually are reaching people and creating engagement
Yeah.
because that's a big signal to that platform that more people should discover you.
Right. I'm thinking of, I think our audiences are slightly different. You already talked about how your guests can run the full gamut from sci-fi writers to, I can't even remember the other example you
Yeah.
gave. But, we hear both as entrepreneurs and podcasters a lot of niching down wisdom. And I think that can be true if you are in a very specific niche and that's who you want to attract. But there's that maxim, fish where the fish are. And I'm thinking about Threads. We didn't talk about Threads. It reminds me of my heyday of Twitter. When people were just,
Yes.
it was the Wild West. You just say stuff and people who resonated, with it, they would come find you. What do you think of the whole fish where the fish are? Using the example of my friend, the interior designer, would you recommend she lean really hard into something like Pinterest, where her ideal client probably is, and then iterate? Because I've been kind of doing a little spray and pray to see what lands, what I learn. What do you think? Specialize?
Again, this is one of those, like, I need to follow my own advice a little bit better. But I think that if somebody is that specific, lean into the Pinterest of it all. Lean
Mhm.
into the Instagram, thinking back to Instagram being beautiful feeds full of beautiful pictures and images and videos, right? But I also think a large part of that can be, yes, we want the audience, but the guests are equally as important. And a lot of the stuff that I've been finding from anecdotal evidence from podcasts I work with or that friends have told me or looking at my own stuff is it really isn't about having the biggest name because they are usually not going to promote the episode as much as
Yeah.
somebody who might be, a very niche down for their industry, but they're going to be really loud and proud about being on your show.
Yeah.
So I think it is being very intentional with your guests, making sure that they match your vibe, that they're going to give something to the audience you want to attract, then helps attract the right audience to you.
Mhm. And
Yep.
Amplified is in the name of one of your podcasts. You have 3, right? But, that's the point, is that like, I call it OPP, other people's platforms or other people's
Yes.
podcasts. And that's the point. A point of having guests, is one of them is to leverage their platforms. And I will say, I was dragging my feet about even starting a Instagram that was not just me and my kids and my dog. But I know it's super low lift for someone to amplify an episode if they are on Instagram and I put tag as collaborator. All they have to do is accept and it's suddenly exposed to their whole audience. And I've
Exactly.
seen a huge lift in that. So you have to think, just talking about the guesting of it all and that being a way to get discovered. There's also one of my guests, Jamila Calhoun. She has a podcast called Unpopular Decisions, and she was all about threads. She was like, I found a lot of my guests there too. We talk about discoverability for audience, but like, talk to me about where your guests come from and like how you leverage your guest platforms.
Interestingly, I mean, I've tried doing a little bit of on social, but I'm so bad about checking my DMs.
I know, me too. Thank you. I'm so glad I'm not the only one. That notification bubble is like 1,000 strong right now.
Yeah, so I have used different methods like Podmatch in the past. When I think I was first starting this podcast, I get mostly inbound at this point. And it's funny that we're talking on a day when I just posted a little rant on LinkedIn about, I'm getting some really, really great guests coming through, but their pitches are so horrible and they're clearly AI, or the booking agent is using an AI tool. And I'm like, I know you don't really speak like this. Hey, I've been listening for a few months and I discovered you when I was at the gym and, let's
My
grow out a little
God.
bit. And so I've taken to this one person today. I can tell they're going to be a great guest because of who they really are. And I had to say, hey, you sent this to an email address I don't use anymore that I have forwarded to my current one. This pitch is horrible. And based on that, I wouldn't book you, but I can tell from the other stuff that you said that you would actually be a fit. So fill out this form and then we'll get back to you. When in doubt, always go to the form and then I run it through the process to make sure that they're an actual fit. So, luckily now, almost 800 episodes into Your Brain Amplified, I do get a lot of inbound. I send out my newsletter. Again, don't do what I do, but like very infrequent, like once this year, and I think I hadn't sent it out in a year, but I just did an invite and ask, hey, I have a new podcast. If you fit this description, book time to be on the show. We had 5 or 6 bookings since yesterday. Most of them, and they have to put in their description and they have to answer all these questions. And I'm like, yeah, they actually do qualify to be. Yeah. And then there are a few booking agents and publicists who do a really good job of pitching. I know they're going to bring me high quality guests every time.
Okay.
And now I also, if they have a book, I'm going to ask for a copy of the book. So, I'm like, if they're going to come on our shows and they have these properties, that helps us do a better job of interviewing them. And it also gives me just another really great tool that I can use in my work and share with other people too. So
absolutely. So we talked about, I said OPP, but guests and their platforms. And I guess my question is, does that play into whether or not you say yes to someone, like how big of the following they have and therefore the potential for amplification to that following? Where does that play into it?
I haven't really been paying much attention, I will say, for the most part, to how big their following is. Do they promise that they're going to share it? They're going to do a backlink on their website, newsletter, right? If they're going to promote it, that's more important to me.
Yeah. A few right people is better than
100%.
No one at all. And let's talk about that because I think it's awkward, right? Like asking people for things. I'm not great at it. So like I said, I'll be like, whatever's easiest. I guess recovering people pleaser still not recovered. What are the best ways to ensure, yes, you've had them check the box, I will promote this, but like, how do you either make it easy or, make it more likely they will comply with that promise that they made to you to expose their audience to you?
Tag and collaborate, as you mentioned. Also, we provide a folder of assets for every guest. It includes at least the static graphic, the cover image. It includes a few different reels to choose from. It'll include perhaps some captions, transcript, show notes, a blog post. Thanks to AI, we can make that process a little bit faster, right? And then refine it, make sure the names are spelled correctly, make sure all the links work and that it's actually capturing what we want to say. But we provide that for every guest. And some podcasts charge for that. Some podcasts also charge for guests. I don't do that model. Somebody's taking their time to share. I know I'm giving them a platform, but they're also sharing things that I want to learn and that my audience wants to learn. So an easy way to thank somebody for being on your show is to provide that. And it gives them a great feeling. if they're not the right fit for something that you're offering, they're going to refer somebody who is. They're going to remember you. They're going to want to do business with you or to stay in touch and share ideas. So why not be a nice person? Maybe it is a little people pleasing, but I would rather be that person, right? And know that that's a relationship I can go back to than be the other person.
I think, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but as you were saying, like you know, AI helps, you know, again, shout out to Riverside, which we're recording on.
Yes.
I usually ignore them because I'm so editorially minded myself, which I know is doing things on hard mode, but it's worth noting that that might be a use case that feels like the cost benefit of involving a machine in creating content is worth it because it has certain criteria. It will spin up essentially what is a reel for you that makes it easier for you and your guest to have this content that is valuable, right?
Yeah. And I will say I'm also from the school of hard. So I do have an editor. Luckily, at this point, most episodes don't need that much editing. We use other tools as well to make sure that we have the right edits for the clips and that we have the right caption and all of that stuff. So I do want to give props to Riverside because they've been increasing the availability and the accessibility and the excellence of a lot of their tools. But I still need the human in the loop.
Yep. I do want to ask you a little bit about that sort of human aspect of it. And there is a certain like magic to what is right. But is there any sort of method to the magic, for lack of better term? Like, how do you know what will make a good clip? Are there certain criteria you look for? Because we are talking about discoverability and getting exposure on other platforms. How can we make sure we're getting the most out of that clip?
Is it going to actually give somebody a really great piece of advice in that short clip? Or is it going to leave them hanging on a really interesting thread, right? So instead of just being something that seems like a throwaway comment, is it something that you think will drive people there? And that isn't always easy to find. That's why I do like using tools where I can go through, even if I'm having a tool help me make the clip, I can go pick out exactly what I want the clip to be. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a really important point that needs to be, this is a really big turning point for them in their story, or this is a piece of advice everybody needs to know.
I am a little old school. I do try to find that, like, just sort of je ne sais quoi. Like, I would be thinking about where did I notice her kind of light up? Because that's for two reasons. One, it makes for better content when you can tell the person who's delivering it is really into it, but also you will be more likely to share it if it's something you genuinely get excited about, right? So those are my squishy metrics that are just kind of like, you know what, if you see it. Yeah, that's what I would say. But, when you talk about it's, I'm constantly dancing around the whole, like, when to use a machine, an AI tool to do something. And people who get, frankly, kind of sanctimonious about, like, oh, AI is doing it all. What about the humans? Yes. And we've been using, I had a Mac, like, when it was brand new. And I think the Control F existed then when I was writing my high school papers. And that's what you were describing a little bit, is that Control F to find a particular
100%. 100%. Absolutely. What I will say, if just to briefly touch on the AI discussion, I do not like it when people maybe they've recorded or they've put in their stuff and they have an AI version of their voice. Because I've listened to podcasts where I'm like, are these people actually speaking or is this an AI version? Because the inflections, you can tell. I'm like, it's too newsy, right? It's too It
for
doesn't
the entire
sound like
show.
And shows with people who have good pedigrees. I don't like that. I think we still have to keep this human part of it. For me, this is how I like the back and forth, the banter and the rabbit holes we go down and the tangents as people. So that's something I hope never gets lost.
Yeah.
And then this is a total other tangent, but I did notice that when Netflix releases their analytics, they did not talk about their podcast downloads and analytics.
Did they?
This is very
leaning
recent.
into it really hard. Yeah,
they've been leaning into it, but in their last quarterly report. And so I think that's an interesting thing to think about too, because I know we always talk about video and discoverability, and you have to be on YouTube and you have to do all this stuff. And yes, we want the video, but I think the last data I saw in Pod News was that people are still primarily listening to shows. I've heard from my students, even if they put an episode on YouTube, it's just in the background. They're not really watching it. They're just still listening to it. So I think we still need to lean heavily into the audio. and
Yeah.
into the experience people have with the audio, and have the video be part of it. But don't think you have to have some full production YouTube,
Studio,
studio,
gorgeous.
yeah,
Like,
Netflix, whatever the case may be.
yeah, like allegedly I've mentioned it more than once, but I don't know if it's, speaking of true crime, but allegedly is one of the Netflix ones. I just want to like live in that studio for a moment. But also, I am not funded by Netflix. And
Exactly.
so I don't, like, that's just an unrealistic goal for me. So you're seeing my tissue in the background if you're
I love
in,
it. I love the color of the box.
no, I'm glad you brought that up. And I do think that I think just even to tie it back to the theme of discoverability, I think, YouTube exists as a discovery tool in a lot of ways. And the reason why people use it as their primary podcast platform is not because they love to look at the faces that are just two squares, Brady Bunch style next to each other, but because it's how they came to discover this. And so, like, my husband, for example, claims to not like podcasts, but he does watch a lot of YouTube. And guess what?
Mm.
Those lines are blurring. But all to say, I do know that the data backs up that a lot of people still consume podcasts on the go, and they listen they watch with their ears. I think that was the term that
Yes.
Tom from Sounds Profitable, Tom Webster, he used that term. That was like, they're still audio natives. And I think that even if the convergence of an audio podcast just continues to where there's no line at all anymore, there is still that audience that is not using their eyes. So make sure that they can follow you too. We are getting to almost the end. I have my little rapid fire questions that I love to do with everyone. It's a perfect segue. What would you say is the biggest myth about durability?
I know it's supposed to be rapid fire, but I'm like, what is it?
I mean, the whole like, you have to do video all the time. I've even said to people, like, even if you don't want to do video, you need to do video clips so that you can have that platform as a discovery.
Yeah, I would say that even though it's commonly thought that discoverability happens on social media platforms, if social media isn't your thing, put some energy there. But I know for my show, that is not where my discoverability has happened at all.
It's in the keywords when people are searching in Apple Podcasts or something.
Keywords, it's in the guests, it's in doing paid advertising as well.
Okay. That's going to be our next episode. I'm going to have to talk to you all about paid advertising. All right. What is the most underrated growth tactic?
Going back to the guests. I have to go back to the guests and to leaning into your connections, making sure that you have a show that people want to listen to. I get a lot of guests on who say, I've been listening for the past 6 months. I really love your show. And that's part of, maybe that's how they found it, because they were looking for shows to guest on, but then they actually become a fan too. And that's the best possible scenario. So make sure that you are that show.
Yeah. And they will mention you maybe even when, like, oh, I was listening to Anika's show. That's awesome. Okay. What is the biggest mistake that thought leadership podcasters make, would you say?
People have to remember that it's not about you, that you are the mechanism who's delivering the message. Too many times people lead with their bona fides and I statements instead of we, instead of team, instead of here's how we can help somebody. And that drives me crazy.
All right. Hot take. I love it. So what is one metric you care about, maybe even more than or besides downloads, given the hyper focus on downloads?
I'm going to keep going back to the guest. Am I getting pitches from the kinds of guests that I would want to listen to myself? And that will add a lot of value. If the answer continues to be yes, then that's a hell yeah. If I'm starting to get if the quality of pitches is going down and I'm not getting people who are even paying attention to what the show is, then that's a signal to me that I need to make a change.
Okay. I like that. I haven't heard that one yet. Good. I know you're not really a niche podcast, but my niche is niche podcasts. The biggest opportunity for niche podcasts is fill in the blank.
It's almost like finding that thing that you want to do for work, that ikigai, right? What are you passionate about?
Ikigai. I'm probably saying it wrong, but the like Venn diagram of what you love, what people want.
I've been learning about some very surprising ones about Land Cruisers, like old Land Cruisers, right? Like people have really niched down. A whole podcast, multiple, like ongoing podcasts, and it's making money and it's found its audience. So really don't worry about what the analytics are for other people. Think about what you really know well and what you think will serve yourself and your audience and the people that you want to work with. And go for it. Like I have a podcast that's completely out of realm of what I'm doing now that I'm going to be starting someday.
Oh.
It's about what happens when you go through something in your life, like a divorce or a bad breakup or some other, an accident, and you have to completely change your expectations and ask yourself the hard questions. And mine is about dating, but it's not really about dating. It's really about how do you find your way back to yourself and loving yourself again. So that's one that probably people wouldn't think of would come from me, but it is based on my own lived experience. It's based on a series of blogs I used to write, and something I am passionate about is like, how do we remain true to ourselves?
That's where I see the overlap of entrepreneurialism and podcasting is like, I wish this podcast exists. It didn't. So guess what? I have to make it. And I love that about you. My very last question that I ask everyone is if you could give new podcasters one piece of advice, either someone who's thinking about doing it or has started and is still kind of like, what would it be?
No, there aren't too many podcasts. There are lots of podcasts, but most of them are not active.
That's right.
You have a message that nobody else can deliver in the way that you can do it. You need to get started. Don't worry about making it perfect. Test out stuff. I have a client who was testing out mics and she's like, oh, I just realized I had this little mic and my hair was in the way. And so it was picking up sound and I had the other mic on before I handed it to somebody. And so it was picking up sound. So test out a few of those little things, but just get started. None of us love the first few episodes, maybe even the first 25, 50 episodes of our shows. I'm always changing like little tweaks of how I do the podcast, what kind of guests, what kind of signals I'm putting out there. So just get started. Just don't hold yourself back. And most of us don't like the way we look on video, and our video episodes probably aren't the quality that we would prefer either. But guess what? It doesn't matter. What matters is you're doing it.
I love it. Probably the best answer I've had yet. Thank you, Anika.
Oh, thank you. It's what I truly believe.
I can tell. Probably why it's best. Okay, so I know you have a bajillion podcasts at least. Where can we find you?
My LinkedIn is probably the best place. Just my name, Anika Jackson, for all things. I don't post on there a ton. And then yourbrandamplified.com is in the middle of a rebrand, but it will have all of my podcasts and my other services and things that I'm doing. So you can go there and just hit refresh a couple times to make sure
you got the latest version.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you again, Anika.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Like me, you were probably a little bit worried about where that podcast episode was going to go just now. Was it going to be all about all of the tools and keywords and tactics that you need to employ? And are you already going through your mental catalog of all the things that you have to do? And maybe you were like, oh no, maybe this podcasting thing isn't for me if I have to do all of those things that Anika does. Believe me, guilty. I was sort of like, oh gosh, what have I forgotten? There are so many fields in my hosting platform that I'm not even filling out. But let's remember, Anika's literal job is to know all this stuff and to teach other people about it, which is why we are so fortunate that we didn't have to enroll in USC Annenberg to learn from her today. And more to the point, we should feel some relief in knowing that all of those tactics may be important depending on your goals. But the most important thing, once again, with podcasting comes down to the humans involved in it. I cannot tell you the amount of relief I felt when, not just once, not just twice, I think more like 3 times when I pushed her for what was the most important success metric or optimization metric or audience growth tactic. It came back to her guest selection. And ironically, I talked about why I chose her at the top of this episode in the intro. And it is true. I've used the term OPP in speaking engagements at the Hospitality Creator Summit where it landed well. But if you're of a certain era, OPP means something different for me. It's other people's platforms. But yes, it's about the human connection that you have in the creation of the episode, but also it's about who they can expose you to that you wouldn't be able to, even if you have a big network. Each time, I'm sure there's some scientific model for this too, but each time you are exposed to another person and then they expose you to their network, it's this multiplication exponentially beyond your own reach. Note that I said to Anika, does their audience size or following play into your criteria for choosing a guest? And she said, no, it's more about their willingness to do me a solid and share my message and our show with that audience. So, hi, Anika. I know you're going to do the same for me. It actually wasn't the reason I chose you to be on this show. It was, like I said, I knew you could teach us so much, and I'm grateful for that. Another rewarding moment, you probably saw me learning this in real time, was this debate about to clip or not to clip, to put those Instagram reels or TikToks or whatever out there in hopes that that inspires people to go over to your podcast and that'll increase your downloads. But even I, who knows, downloads aren't the whole point, especially for people like me who are trying to share my wisdom with the world, remind people that I can work with them on their podcast. It almost doesn't matter if they're podcast listeners, because again, your podcast is this rich source material that then does spin off your newsletter, which kind of endearing that Anika doesn't send hers that often. It makes me feel better about being somewhat inconsistent with mine. You have this central hub of your content flywheel that then feeds all of the other platforms on which someone can discover you. Discoverability for people like us who are hoping to have a platform for our message to, let's face it, generate new leads for clients and people we want to work with. It's about discoverability across platforms, not just in podcasting. Of course, we want people to hear this thing that we spend our precious time on, but it's not the only thing. And thank God that your podcast is a deep well of content that you can then disseminate across all of those platforms. If indeed you do want to work with me in any capacity, I am building a new cohort-based program that I'll be launching in September. And if you want to know more about it, watch this space. You can also always email me at Courtney@soundsgreatstrategy.com. Just say, hey, keep me posted on that program you're developing, or hey, can we maybe hop on a podcast clarity call because I want to try it and I'm not sure if it's right for me. Again, it's Courtney@soundsgreatstrategy.com. This is Talking the Talk, a podcast about podcasting. If you're thinking about podcasting, let's talk. If you're podcasting, stick with it, keep learning, keep creating, and I'll see you next time.